What's going on? Morning, guys. Good morning. Good morning. Mr. Seriously, SoFi is always good on earnings. I'll see what's going on with it. I don't know if there's any price action that probably indicates it, but we'll take a look at it. I will say, what a nice little gap up we had. Interesting night of Halloween. I think those of you that probably saw the headlines. Takeoff part of the Migos, he died overnight. We also had the Cincinnati Bengals that ended up losing just horrendous type of football last night on the part of the Cincinnati Bengals. But other than that, though, it's a feel good Tuesday. I mean, the other bad part I want to say is probably that we have Powell coming to town tomorrow. If you swung puts, you're likely waking up pretty sad this morning as well, because that is a hell of a gap up as SPY is up 1% this morning. Some earnings highlight that kind of just I want to say is a little bright spot. We did have Uber that had their earnings. They're up roughly about 12% this morning on a revenue beat. So that's a positive sign. We also had as well Pfizer that actually reported their earnings as well. They also had a beat, and they also had raised their guidance for the upcoming year. So those pretty much the two earnings highlights. Other than that, I think everyone's just pretty much in a kind of a little bit of a melt up mode. I know it's not much more of a panic in terms of Powell coming in tomorrow. So the market looks like it's pretty much anticipating whether it be 50 to 75 basis points rate hike. And that's why the market's just pretty much in cruise control as we are just feeling that little melt up type of action here. So strong gap up across the board. What I would say is just be relatively, I want to say be more conservative just because of the fact that you're going to need to be very selective in what names you particularly look to trade today. I'm going to pretty much look to kind of feed off of the flow alerts today, off of TFC flow alerts. Let's see if the buyers continue to pretty much step in, as I do see SPY continuing to kind of give us a little bit of a push here before the opening bell. I'm gonna kind of use the flow alerts here to really give me that kind of vibe. Do we continue this massive push that we're already up 4 points on SPY into the opening bell? Do we continue the melt up as we already so much high into the opening bell? Or do we see a regression? Do we see a pullback? But off of the 30-minute here, those of you guys can pretty much see my chart. The illustration was basically a nice little flag, nice little wedge action that took place into the end of yesterday. We had the nice push. We saw the nice gap up. We saw also the headline that pretty much I mentioned yesterday morning that we had Goldman Sachs talking about an up to 5% increase in rates. We also had JP Morgan that came out with a headline yesterday, and that kind of just took the market to a whole nother level. And that's something that I believe that's right when their headline came out. JP Morgan actually mentioned that the S&P 500 could surge over 10% if this Wednesday if the Feds were to pretty much only raise rates by 50%, which would basically give us a little bit of an ease for the broader markets because it's going to be that the Feds are kind of just loosening the tightening at least this term around. All right, and then we'll have to see what comes to town when Powell is around yet again within the next few months. So that's what it's pretty much kind of just gave us that kind of catapult overnight, and we had already seen the markets up roughly what was it about 50 basis points on the AS futures. So that's kind of caught my attention as well. Just kind of scanning through some different names, kind of some things that catch my attention. I'm gonna be watching for Tesla here, a nice little megaphone action that's taking place. I'm gonna look to see if we can get a move over 230. This is roughly already over the megaphone. If we can get a retrace, a nice little retrace, a nice little support test, right? Then if we end up pushing up towards 239, that's the overshoot that I'm looking at. That's pretty much what I'm looking at is the upside, is that 239. So I'm gonna look for the upside on 239. If you can potentially get a dip buy at 231, 231.39 is my dip buy this morning. We should be able, if the market continues to be on cruise control, we push to 239 half, and then watch for a support test right around 236 is what I'm gonna look for. So again, dip buy 231 half, and we should take this up towards 239, close enough to 240 for the upside, and that's contingent upon the broader market holding up as it should. All right, so that's what I'm going to continue to watch. Apple, nice little monster move. You can see off of the 30-minute here. You have a nice little ascending, broadening wedge type of action that's taking place. We did end up getting that nice little wedge breakout as we did with futures and SPY. I'm going to watch upside. I'm looking at for resistance is 156.36 for my overhead resistance. We'll see if we end up hitting that resistance and then regressing. Otherwise, above 156.36, I'm looking towards 159 for the upside target in continuation of this little melt up that we have. All right. So that's going to be another name that I kind of keep an eye on. Other than that, I was watching FedEx. This is one that was on my watch list as of yesterday. And I believe off the 30-minute here, yeah, 30-minute kind of shows us. I can probably stretch it out to the hour here. Stretch it out to the hour. What you can basically see is a nice little wedge breakout here. It's also noticeable on the hourly, on the daily as well. So you did hit the resistance off of the 200 EMA off of the hourly. You see the regression, a nice little potential support test that you had into the close yesterday at that 116 mark. But a nice little U-turn. Let's see if we can actually break over that 200-day EMA now over 162, and that should make its way up towards 168 half roughly 168.71 is where I have my specific target set. All right. So I really like this one. If I kind of give you out to the daily here on FedEx, I think that gives you the better image of a clear wedge breakout. So you see we had the massive breakdown off of earnings. And then we started to build a nice wedge, and we finally just broke out of that wedge as of yesterday, and we got the regression, the little support test. So that's to give you just a clear image on FedEx. So that's another one that I'll continue to watch, see how that one progresses. But I do favor the upside on FedEx, especially if the broader market is going to continue to pretty much rally as we've already seen the gap up. All right. Of course, I'm also going to see how the semis are doing. That's usually a very big indication if continuation is going to be expected. If the semis start to really regress, we see the semis stepping into the red territory this morning. That's going to be something a little bit more of a concern to my end, in which, okay, if the semis are going to be lagging in the market for the tech sector, what's really going to be continuing to carry the weight for the market for this rally to continue and sustain off of this gap up. So that's what, of course, I'm going to keep an eye on. Of course, your three-headed monsters, your Apple, your Tesla, and your Microsoft. Those three can obviously carry the market despite anything in the market being in red territory. So those are three monsters, of course, you want to keep an eye on. But bigger thing is I'm gonna keep my size down today. Right? That's probably my bigger sentiment. I don't want to go in with heavy size, especially with how the market's up so much already. And then knowing the bigger part is that the market is waiting on data tomorrow. So with the market waiting on data, we may perhaps get a quick and I want to say a swift move within the first 30 minutes to an hour of market open here. And then the rest of the day we could potentially chop. Because once we get into that stage where the market's waiting on a specific number, specific data to come out, you're going to get these sporadic moves. But then most of all the sporadic move is just going to lead up towards chop or trading within a range, to say a better term. All right. And that's where you do not want to get caught in, because a lot of that movement is going to be move. It's going to move like molasses. It's going to be so slow, and you're going to see your premiums just literally move with the increments of about like literally a percent. And you're going to be looking and say the stock moved about $1, and then likely your percentage gains are so small. So that's where I don't want to get caught up in the premium chop, to say. And that's where I'm choosing to pretty much go with lower premiums. But I'm going to let the flow alerts pretty much kind of give me my vibe, give me that guidance to say, all right, are buyers stepping in off the end of this gap up that we've had, a massive gap up? Or are we going to see pretty much profit taking at the bell? Are we going to see put buyers start to step in ahead of Powell going into tomorrow? So that's something that's going to be intriguing to me. I'm going to wait for my opening range, of course, to establish within that first 15 minutes. Give me my opening range. Let's see if we break to the north, break to the south, and then we look for that trend to pretty much establish itself. All right. But kind of just giving you a little bit of a gist here as well. I do like NVIDIA as well. This is one that I've been watching. You had a nice little inside day yesterday off in NVIDIA here. And so I'm going to watch to see if we can get a nice little fluid price action over 140.22. I'm going to watch for further upside. And then we're going to be targeting the 100-day EMA up towards 153, especially those of you that are looking for swings. And actually, speaking of swings, be very careful trying to swing into tomorrow. Even though this does feel like a pretty much a slow on melt up, as we've already had going into this morning, be very cautious, because then you may get another sentiment that came out. We had the Goldman Sachs one that came out over the weekend. We had JPM, which you could say aided this sort of pump to some degree. Let's see if there's another headline that comes out tomorrow, and that's where you do not want to be caught on the wrong side, especially leaning in towards Powell. So I would strongly suggest relatively staying cash. If you are planning to swing anything overnight going into Powell tomorrow, I would suggest at least not taking this week expiration, try to go out at least towards next week, if not further out, to buy yourself some time, especially if price action does not favor your puts or calls. All right, so that's pretty much what I would pretty much echo to that. Otherwise, again, not much else. I would probably say you see the dollar's pretty much rising. We're pretty much close enough to my resistance I'm watching on the dollar here, right around this 111 high, close enough to 112 is what I'm watching for resistance. You could basically see a nice little 20 EMA as a resistance from current spot right now. But I have this going close enough to 112 before we see a rejection off of the dollar here as it continues to rise. Bond yields look to pretty much stabilized. They're in the red territory. So that's pretty much a positive sign for equities as we see the gap up. But let's see if there's any reversals that take place. Let's see if once the dollar hits its little resistance here, close enough to that 112 spot, if we see a reversal in equities and we see that rejection take place on the dollar. So that's what I'm going to look at. Let's see actually how the VIX is looking this morning. Yeah, so VIX is pretty much just in literally death mode right now. But support that I'd be watching here is right around this 25 flat. That does give us room to give us a nice little more of a pump within that first 30 minutes to an hour, as I was mentioning. You may get a sporadic movement. Be very careful in terms of getting that sporadic movement and then seeing the VIX flush right into that $25 mark. All right. So it is opening bell. Again, let your opening range establish. Don't get too crazy and monitor your size of your positions. All right. But other than that, it looks like I will transition over to standard voice for our TFC members, and I will see you guys. Anything, just drop a comment. I will see if I can pretty much question anything. So I will be here for another 15 minutes on with my stream up. So that's just something for you guys to be aware. But any questions, drop me a comment or a question in the chat, and I will be here to pretty much respond to you guys. All right.